Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this panel session, which is going to explore the future of London and its competitive position. Let me start by inviting the panelists to come up onto the platform. I'm going to invite everybody just to give a very brief introduction to them to explain where they're coming from. Starting with myself, as you know, I write for the Financial Times as a contributing editor and columnist. My background is as a chartered accountant. I have combined my writing with a variety of other things. I helped found the shareholder activist and corporate governance consultancy PERC, which I chaired for 9 years, and I recently stepped down as chairman of a PLC called Quintain, which is best known for its big urban regeneration schemes in Wembley and Greenwich. My current interest in securities is that I'm a trustee of the Pearson Group Pension Fund, which invests about £2 billion worth of money. So I now turn to Simon.
Thank you. My name is Simon Gleeson. I'm a partner at Clifford Chance. I think I was a slug in a previous life because I've come back as a regulatory lawyer, which when I started doing it was a small and rather backward industry. How things change.
Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris Cummings. I'm Chief Executive of the City UK. The City UK is the organisation set up a little over a year ago to represent financial and professional services here in the UK. We have three objectives: to rehabilitate financial services, to champion the competitiveness of the sector, and then to promote internationally all that is good about UK-based financial and professional services. My background is in the industry. I've been a banker in the days when it was possible to be an honest and good banker. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. And also a management consultant. So I've seen the industry from all sides and given it a bit of an under-the-hood inspection and kicked the tires a few times too.
Ruben.
My name is Ruben Lee, and I'm CEO of Oxford Finance Group, which is a consulting firm which looks at how to run financial markets. I've been doing it for about 20 years, prior to which I was a Don at Oxford University, prior to which I worked for Salomon Brothers, a very honest bank. I have written a whole range of different stuff, most recently a book entitled Running the World's Markets, The Governance of Financial Infrastructure, and I will get maybe 17 cents royalty for each copy sold.
Michael.
Michael Mainelli. I'm the chairman of Zien. Zien is a think tank based in the City of London, very commercial. We have a number of clients in the financial services area. My personal background is 10 years of science and technology, and then moving into the city in '84 prior to Big Bang. And I also sit on the board of an AIM-listed company, on the board of the United Kingdom Accreditation Service, regulating laboratories throughout the nation, and a few other things.
Good. Well, thank you to the panel for that. Michael, I'd like to start the discussion with you, if I may, because you really pioneered the index on which we all rely in looking at the competitiveness of financial centres. And could I say to you, I mean, at the moment, your index published back in March was showing that London and New York are still there up at the top at a time when economic power has been shifting radically to Asia. Does it surprise you that the Asians haven't caught up further than they have done?
John is referring to the Global Financial Centres Index, and there are free copies which Herbie has arranged for all of you. The last index was actually published in September, John.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's a 6-monthly index,
yep.
Yes. Over the course of the index, which began in 2005, actually the Asian centres have caught up tremendously. So Hong Kong is pretty much statistically level pegging with London and New York. So actually over a 5-year period, that's been quite tremendous. And I recall back as recently as 2006 and 7, people saying that clearly Asia would always be subordinate to the West, and that's clearly not the case. In the latest index, what we've seen has been a real hammering amongst the secondary European centres, so Madrid, Paris, etc., sort of understandable. And very oddly, the index is compiled in a way I won't bore the audience with, but we've always been stunned that the Nordics don't do better, and suddenly in this last index, the Nordic countries have surged. They have all the right factors, but they don't seem to have the right marketing. But I'm sure Chris has got some thoughts on how to do that.
I wanted to pick up on one thing that you said, and I'm not familiar with the precise methodology of the index, but it does strike me that to think about changes of positions in financial centres over a 6-month horizon seems to me to be too short. Now, I know that you are also very interested in long-run issues, 100-year issues, but it seems to me that financial centres will change positions over decades rather than over 6 months. So in a way, I'm surprised that you put as much emphasis as you do in the relative improvement in the Asian ones. And we know that they will be improving, but over a 6-month horizon, that just seems too too unbelievable, really.
Well, tell us a little bit about this methodology.
Well, the first thing to address Ruben's point is the Global Financial Centers Index is looking ahead. It's looking at the future attractiveness. And that does change overnight with a regulatory announcement or a large-scale disaster. So we're not looking at where they are positioned today. We're looking at what people in the global financial services industry feel will be their positions in the future. So I think that addresses the timing bit. The way that the index works is that there are really two ways to do a social popularity type index. And one I term the kind of Cosmo sex survey, where you fill the survey in, and and if you get a really good result, you go to your spouse and you say, "Hey, I'm really magnificent in bed." And if it says actually you're really quite terrible at it, you bin it because it's a silly, stupid little survey in a woman's magazine anyway. So you have this sort of tension in these things. And so a lot of the simplistic surveys kind of ask people to rate a center on a scale of 1 to 10. And as you can imagine, you're some sort of lugubrious Swede, and it's okay, and you've just watched your latest murder mystery, and all right, you might just give Stockholm a 2, and you're an Italian, and both your legs have just been broken in a car accident, and you're like, well, it's not such a bad day, I'll give Rome an 8. So how do you actually start to balance those things out? Well, what we've done is to create an index where people rate centers that they know. There's no point in this index if you only know one center because you clearly don't have a point of comparison. And in fact, you really have to provide us with more than 3 comparisons to get in here. We throw out the home result in a complicated way. We keep it to get some balancing, but your actual home results don't matter. So when people have done things, for example, in China to get 800 people to click and say that a certain city is brilliant, it was thrown out in 2 ways. One, they only clicked on one city, so we had no point of comparison, and 2, it was their home city, so it bounces out in both ways. So there's a lot of that. What we then do is we take a Ruben Lee. Ruben Lee is a well-traveled man. He's been to Hong Kong, he's been to Moscow, he's been to all these places. And we say, that's fantastic, Ruben. You're from London-ish, so we throw out your London results. And we say, great, that's Ruben. How would Ruben statistically have rated all the other centers? And that's actually how the index is constructed.
You've just flattened me.
No. And what it does is, if you look at the index, and we have the raw results and also the index results, it actually tightens up the ends. It compensates for a lot of transient popularity in places, for example, like Shenzhen, which is obviously up and coming, going places, etc. But when you look at where the factors are headed, Shenzhen has a hill to climb, without question.
Chris, can I turn to you? I mean, what worries you about Asia? Which are the financial centres which you feel pose a genuine threat to London? And in which areas of business do you think that the threat is greatest?
Well, I know the temptation is always to look at Asia and the names trip off the tongue. And I don't think we should underestimate the allure of Asia. But actually, from my perspective, what we see is more driven by something that Michael referred to, which is attitude. And I look at attitude and actually the hunger to build international financial centres seems to be coming equally strong from Brazil. São Paulo has got a real hunger and appetite to develop its financial centre. As does Moscow, in fact. Whilst the Prime Minister was last visiting Moscow, we signed a memorandum of understanding with our Russian counterparts to help Moscow develop itself, admittedly first as a regional financial centre, but with clear political and now commercial aspirations to develop its financial centre as well, its international financial centre. And we're on the verge of doing similar things with Istanbul, as well as the more usual Asian suspects. So actually what we're seeing is a worldwide phenomenon, actually, of parts of the world, interesting, emerging, rapidly growing cities, all of whom have got a hunger to build their financial centres. And then I get back on the plane and I come back and I arrive in London, and we immediately start twiddling our thumbs and saying, well, actually, it's not terribly sure if this is a game you want to be in anyway. I know we've been captain of the first 11 for the last 50, 100, 200 years, certainly since the banking community moved here, but I'm really not sure about it anymore. And so it's really down to attitude that is my gravest concern for some of the issues that Michael talks about when he talks about the future look of his survey.
Simon, could I ask you on that? I mean, this very interesting point about these fast-rising sort of cities, particularly among the BRICS. I mean, if you're taking cities like Moscow or Shanghai, which is way up the league table that Michael produces. I mean, these are places which don't have good property rights, which have terrible corporate governance, awful accounting, weak auditing. I mean, and in the case of mainland China, capital controls, a real question about whether they really do want to liberalize. Are these really such big threats to London?
Well, the first thing you have to do is distinguish between a national financial centre and an international financial centre. I mean, talk to the finance minister of any emerging nation, and he is desperate to financialise his economy because, you know, you've got to remember, if you talk to the emerging markets and talk about the financial crisis, they will assume you're talking about 98. That was what really hit them, and their perception is the reason they were hit so hard was their economies were not financialised, and that was why they were exposed to the sort of international fluctuations. Now, we spend a lot of time, I spend a lot of time, basically writing financial centre legislation for up-and-coming centres, because they absolutely realise that that lack of property rights, that lack of a viable court system, is holding them back significantly in their primary aim of financialisation. But of course, the system you've got is the system you've got. A Russian company doesn't have a better option than Russian law at the moment. So from a national financial centre point of view, it doesn't matter. As soon as you want to become international, then upgrading your legal system, your property rights, your dispute resolution is a sort of non-negotiable minimum. And for most of these countries, they are very focused on that.
And Simon's exactly right in that. And if I can use Moscow just as a case study, because it's the one we're doing most work on at the moment. And some people said, well, why is City UK helping Moscow develop its financial centre? And I said, well, we know that Moscow is being courted by New York, Washington, by Paris, by Frankfurt. So this is a competitive game, and sometimes I think we lose track of that here in the UK, that we're engaged in a competitive sport. So somebody was going to do it anyway. And actually getting help, the UK being the country to help Moscow, I think is very good. And at a base level, it's a bit like the Klondike Gold Rush. The people who made the money weren't the miners, they were the people selling the picks and shovels to the miners who made the money. So I think there is a direct commercial advantage there for us. But in terms of Moscow in particular, the very first thing that we spoke to the Russians about was the rule of law. Having had a very interesting dinner discussion with somebody from Moscow who explained to me that they did have a very strong rule of law, and if Putin wanted to drop it for a moment or two in order to get something done, that was fine, because he'd just raise it again. So there's a slight difference in understanding of rule of law. But the first work stream that we set up to help Moscow develop as a financial centre was around legal services and alternative dispute resolution. And that work is going terrifically well at the moment, because the Russians fully understand that if they're going to attract companies to conduct business, to invest, to help them do the wherewithal, they're going to need a competitor to the existing Russian law. And certainly that work stream is going great guns at the moment. It's really powering ahead. And it enjoys the political support of both President and Prime Minister, or do I mean Prime Minister and President, and a lot of the political infrastructure as well. So for me, it does come down to establishing the fundamentals, and rule of law is about as fundamental as you can get.